Every single piece of complex AI we have today, whether it's generating art or driving a car, it all comes back to this one surprisingly simple idea from way back in 1957. It's called the perceptron. It's basically the original artificial neuron, and if you can wrap your head around this, you're on your way to understanding all of modern AI. Seriously. So before we can even think about AI that writes poetry or diagnoses diseases, we have to ask a much more basic question. What is the absolute simplest brain we can possibly build? Like, just a single thing that can make a decision. That's what we're going to do right now. We're going to build one from the ground up.
And to do that, we have to rewind way back. We're going to take a look at that original artificial neuron right at the dawn of AI to see where this whole crazy idea got its start.
Now, the perceptron story is a real roller coaster. So in 1957, this guy, Frank Rosenblatt, introduces it, and people were hyped. This was seen as the first step towards thinking machines. But then, bam, 1969 hits. Some major criticisms come out, pointing out what it can't do, and the whole field of AI research kind of grinds to a halt. It was a big deal. But fast forward to right now, and those exact same core ideas, they are the absolute bedrock of the massive deep learning models that are changing our world. And this really hits the nail on the head. You have to remember, the goal here wasn't just to do some clever math. The dream, the real ambition, was to simulate how our own neurons work, to capture a little spark of biology and put it inside a machine. So how does this little artificial neuron actually, think? Let's crack it open and look at the anatomy of its decision. I promise it's way more straightforward than it sounds. Okay, to make this real, let's use a super simple example. Let's pretend our perceptron is trying to figure out if a student will pass or fail a test, and it only has two clues to go on: how many hours the student studied and how many classes they actually showed up for. That's it. So here's how it works, in 4 simple steps. First, you've got the inputs. That's the data, right? Hours studied, classes attended. Then, and this is the most important part, it does a weighted sum. It basically decides how important each of those inputs is. Maybe studying is more important than attending class, or vice versa. Then, step 3 is activation. It's just a simple rule. If the final score is high enough, it fires. And that leads to step 4, the output, a clear final decision: pass or fail.
And all the magic, really, is in those weights. Just think of them as little volume knobs. Our perceptron might learn over time that hours studied is way more important than attending class. So it turns the hour study knob way up. These knobs are exactly how the perceptron learns. It just keeps tweaking them over and over until it starts getting the predictions right.
Okay, so just to recap the key players here. You've got your inputs, that's the evidence. The neuron weighs them. Then there's this other thing called a bias. You can think of it as like a thumb on the scale. It's a little push that makes the neuron more or less likely to say yes from the get-go. All of that gets fed into the activation function. That's the final yes or no decider, which gives us our final output.
All right, enough theory. It's cool, but let's actually see this thing work. We're going to watch our perceptron learn to solve a problem by literally learning how to draw a line. Okay, here's the challenge for our little neuron. We've got these 2 groups of data points, class 0 and class 1. You can see their positions on the chart. The goal is dead simple. Can our perceptron figure out how to draw one single, straight line that perfectly separates all the blue dots from all the red dots? And look at that, it did it! By tweaking those little weight knobs again and again, the perceptron finds the perfect line. Everything on one side gets called class 0, everything on the other gets called class 1. It worked. It actually learned something. But, every hero has their weakness, their kryptonite. And our simple little perceptron is no different. So now, let's give it a puzzle that it just can't solve. And this brings us to the question that really defined the next half-century of AI research. What do you do when the data is messy, when the answer isn't so clean that you can just draw one straight line to find it? Meet the classic XOR problem. It looks simple, right? The output should be 1 or true if either input is 1, but not if both are. It's a simple little logic puzzle, but it represents a huge class of problems where the answer isn't just more is better. It's about balance and context. And this is the perceptron's kryptonite. Go ahead, try it. No matter how you draw a single straight line on that graph, you will never be able to cleanly separate the ones from the zeros. It's just impossible. Because the problem isn't linear, and the only tool the perceptron has in its toolbox is a straight line.
So it fails. Completely.
But here's where the story gets really, really good. That failure, it wasn't the end. Actually, it turned out to be the most important discovery of all. Because understanding why it failed is what unlocked the next 50 years of AI and led us straight to the deep learning we have today. So what's the fix? Well, it's pretty elegant. If one neuron can only draw one straight line to solve a simple problem, the answer is to use a whole bunch of them to solve a complex one. A deep neural network is just that, layers and layers of these perceptrons working as a team. They don't just draw straight lines anymore. They combine all their simple lines to create incredibly complex curved boundaries, the kind you need to solve a puzzle like XOR, and eventually, things like recognizing a cat in a photo. And that, right there, is the big takeaway. The perceptron's failure on that simple logic puzzle was the proof. It showed everyone that to solve the world's messy, complicated problems, one neuron wasn't going to cut it. We needed teams of them. We needed layers. We needed depth. That's literally where the name deep learning comes from. It was the solution born directly from the perceptron's most famous limitation.
So we end up right back where we started. We built one simple neuron, and we found its limits pretty quickly. But that exact limit showed us the way forward. And it leaves you with a pretty wild question to think about. If one of these simple neurons is so limited, what in the world becomes possible when we connect billions of them?